Case of the Mondays. All right. How we doing?
We're back.
We're back to regularly scheduled programming, and I couldn't be more excited.
Yes. Let's dive in. Podcasts about marketing trends and all the things I'm sharing on Substack.
Episode 51 of Good Thinking Weekly.
Yeah, let's talk.
So, in full disclosure, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I read a lot of things, and I think one of the things that hit me is going through, like, there was so much that I wanted to talk about, and maybe it's because, I love distraction and really being focused on this versus kind of all the other things that have been happening in LA with the fires and all going on. But also, like, I just think there's some really interesting things that I want to catch up and chat about. I guess that's a roundabout way of saying let's dig into a lot. I would like to take your advice and dig into the sports section and dig into more of that. We'll dig into some of the fun stuff at the end. But also there's a couple of things throughout that I want to talk about that I can't just not talk about. And the first of which is the case of the Mondays.
All right, let's talk about that. Because you actually were the one who sent me the second link that I have in there. Kirsten does me lots of favors and sends me lots of things because she's always on LinkedIn. And so she sent me this post from the CMO at Coors about the new campaign. And so I read it and I was like, oh, this is interesting because I've read about this campaign and it's not the same thing that I had read. So that's kind of what I want to talk about, is that there is a campaign. I'm just not sure what campaign it really is that we're talking about. So
right.
They come
so
out,
backstory.
Backstory. Coors comes out with this limited edition case, and it says Mondays or Monday Lights, like however it is Coors Light normally. So instead of Coors, it just says Mondays. I read about it 2 days before Kirsten sends it, and there's a quote from the VP of Coors that says, this limited edition case is specifically made for the Monday after the best Sunday, which is the worst Monday, which is the Monday after Super Bowl. And I think to myself, cool, like, interesting campaign, like, like, it's fun to do something with the idea of, like, the case of the Mondays and, like, yes, like, people, like, Super Bowl is right around the corner and, like, they want to insert themselves into that conversation. So I was, like, kind of tracking it, but it wasn't actually, like, a super standout campaign to me, like, other than the fact that it's notable that they're, have printed new boxes and things and replaced their name. But then you sent me this LinkedIn post from the CMO.
Right, because prior to that, all of my posts were like talking about this campaign. Did they screw up? Did they mean to screw up? Was it planted? Was it intentional? Was it not intentional? And it was just they misspelled refreshments.
Yeah, so they ran like a New York Times like full page ad and they misspelled the word refreshments, which honestly is one of the hardest words in the world to spell. So like, anybody can do it. But what she says the story of the Monday case is that they had a case of the Mondays where they misspelled this thing and then they scrambled and created this limited edition case in response to this spelling error. Which to me is actually like a more fun campaign, like more spontaneous, more
exactly
exciting, more like, it reminded me a little bit of the California Pizza Kitchen thing we've talked about that I can link to, owning up to errors and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. You could see people submitting, like it could be a whole campaign of like, what's your worst case of the Mondays?
Exactly.
Got a long
and
list.
I was like, oh, okay, that's super interesting. Except that that's not what they had said it was 2 days ago. So was it really that the ad was planted and that it wasn't a case of the Mondays? And even so, that whole narrative doesn't make any sense. So were they already making this and then they were like, oh, we can just like release it as a different campaign? Like, I don't know. So anyway, like, I think that honestly, both campaigns in and of themselves could have been extremely like fine campaigns. And I'm not necessarily criticizing the campaign. I just wish I knew which one it was. So maybe the case of the Mondays is the fact that they didn't get together as a team and decide what they were going to brief the press on.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, because they're both really good campaigns. But I think that being just a case of the Mondays, like the legs on that and the cultural relevance,
That was
like I
a
think
great
that's what's really
campaign.
interesting to me. But I think that's what's interesting. If you take a beat and you kind of think about it, maybe there are two potential campaigns and you take a beat and you go, yes, Coors, that's probably more of their audience, right? Going after the Mondays of like the Super Bowl and really focused on that audience. But like, is there a larger cultural relevance piece where they can really lean into? Could be interesting.
Yeah, I just would like it to be consistent because I'm me and I spend too much time on the internet, so I need all the
Yes.
narratives to track.
Right. Fair
So
enough. Yeah. Okay. A couple other things. And actually, there's one other thing that I just remembered that I wanted to chat about because you just can't not. So CES was obviously happening, but I think the Hormometer,
I mean, how
we
good is
can't not
that
talk about
name?
this. We can't not talk about this.
I mean, we could just talk about naming as a whole thing.
Yes, we
like,
could.
all day.
Yes, we could.
I mean, like that could just be something that
Done
we
a lot
could
of
talk
this.
about. But like,
Yes.
yes. And if you ever need to name anything and don't want it to be called Hormometer, I'm happy to help.
We got you covered.
Yes, we have a lot of naming experience. But yeah, I mean, so I think like beyond the name, I think it's really interesting. So, it's generally speaking, like you'd think that like the health sector and health startups generally would be like booming. And what I've been reading through Eric Newcomer and like other people, maybe even Rex Woodbury has talked about this, but like health is kind of a difficult sector. And so like it hasn't really done that well with VCs. Like it's complicated. It requires an enormous amount of investment. A lot of startups come in and they don't really actually have any medical expertise, which tends to not work out in their favor. Forward like shuttered over the new year, that big startup. They got
Which is
tons
great.
and tons of investment. I think it's just a really difficult space for people. But I do think that there is and has been like this very growing interest in specifically women's health, but also just like understanding that so much like around menopause has to do with hormones and a reassessment of how that's working. And so I thought it was interesting that Eli Health, the Hormometer, will eventually measure testosterone and estradiol so that you essentially will like pop this in like it's like it looks like a thermometer, which is obviously how they got to this terrible name. And it would tell you kind of those levels instead of having to do all of the crazy blood tests that I know so many people who are taking hormones are having to do all the time. So this would kind
just
of
did them this morning.
Right. So that would essentially like eliminate that process for you. So you would do that at home and then you could like share that with whoever is like helping you with your hormones to like dial things in. They also have cortisol and progesterone, which is where they started. Obviously, progesterone is highly linked to fertility, so pregnancy and like trying to track that. And then cortisol, which is like, I mean, if you spend any amount of time on Instagram, you know that cortisol is the cause of all the problems in your face and all the problems of your heart and all the problems of your stress and everything bad that you think of yourself as. Cortisol is the criminal. So they're smart to start with that because there's obviously an enormous amount of talk and interest there. And then I thought it was interesting the Perry device, which is, maybe not their most original name, but like significantly less offensive. But Identify Her as a company name, also not great. So again, here to help. They are specifically tracking perimenopause. And for me, what I thought was very interesting about that is we know that there's absolutely no studies on perimenopause and like no clinical studies or any like clinical trials, like literally zero. Not like zero. Yeah. So I think that they're well positioned actually from a data perspective, because I think that there's a lot of people who are interested in trying to figure these things out and are doing this kind of like ad hoc through like all the different ways that they can do that themselves. And I think there's a lot of women who desperately want to figure out what's going on. Like I recently learned that itchy ears are a perimenopause symptom that I could have just like known but didn't know.
Itchy ears? Okay.
Itchy ears, like the inner part of your ear becomes itchy. But of course I had that like, and I was like, oh my God, am I going through perimenopause? And then of course Instagram served me up a thing to tell me that actually, yes, that is a perimenopause symptom, an early perimenopause symptom. And I put beauty grass on it, and it went right away.
No shock. Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Actually transitioning nicely from that, I haven't gotten the name out of my head. Longevity dads.
It's so good, right? Okay, so yeah, let's get into the sports section, because I put this in sport, but like I could have done a whole episode, or we could do a whole episode on Jessica Fino's 2025 predictions. Like she's like, her predictions are truly like one of the things that I look forward to on Substack the most, like every year. Like last year, her prediction, like one of her predictions, and I know it's going to sound perverse, but it came true, was that butthole like beauty was going to become a thing. And then like literally like 2 months later, there was like a butthole brand that came out. So like she just is paying very close attention to a lot of things, and there's a lot of really good predictions in there, and I highly recommend like reading that whole thing. And maybe I'll unpack a few more in the kind of
cool
comments, because in the body, because like there are some really good ones in there that I could really get into. But longevity dads was one that stood out to me, and I actually like posted a note about it, and Jessica asked me some questions about it, so maybe you'll see that sometime. But I think it's so interesting. So she was saying that like essentially, and I want to make sure I get the language right, so let me just open her letter so that I get it completely, because the way she writes things, it's just too perfect. I can't butcher it. I know it's right at the end because I've read the email like 5 times. Last year she wrote about serum moms and how it's like, that was kind of a term. It was like talking, anyway, I'll unpack that in the thing. But this year she was saying serum moms are being replaced by longevity dads. And longevity dads are essentially like men who are obsessed with living longer and maintaining a more youthful appearance. Like, and then similarly, like they may also be encouraging like such things in their children as a like a result of this. Like, you know, like how like it's like, okay, moms who are like obsessed with the way they look and like, or not, like, you know, like whatever, like eventually like your kids watch that, you know, that your kids learn everything that you do, and then they just like
for
eventually
sure,
like, yeah, like I mean curse words, and you know, just being one example.
Yes.
But like, so, but what was interesting to me was not necessarily the second part of it, but more the first part of it of like, I am seeing a lot of longevity dad stuff in my life, right? Like we know a few of them, you and I in common, like many of your friends are people that I think of as like longevity dads.
100%.
They're like sauning, they're ice bathing, they're, you know, taking 27 supplements, they're taking creatine, they are tracking their hormones, like, and they're also very involved dads, and like kind of spin it to themselves as not this like beautification thing, but this like, I want to live longer, healthier, happier for my children.
100% for my family. 100%. I think that's the
right. And they sell themselves that. And then they like, whether or not that's entirely true, I don't know. But like my own family members like are 100% longevity dads. Like my brothers, my husband.
Totally.
My one brother in particular, like, I mean, 4 a.m. workouts, creatine. The other brother takes, literally, I asked him about it because I texted him to make sure it was okay. I told anyone about this. It was like 17 supplements a day. Like, I mean, he gives your supplement routine a run for its money.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I hit the longevity dad category, other than I'm a mom, not a dad, but you know, there's that.
Right. And so like getting a lot of like scans. And so what I thought was interesting, and I related it
DEXA
to this.
scans, amazing.
Yeah. So maybe you can unpack what DEXA scans are for people, but like what I think, where I was kind of drawing the parallel is that, so Eternal, which is this like new niche healthcare concept, and they're essentially like, if you want to think of like One Medical, but think of it as One Medical specifically for people who identify as like pro or not pro athletes. So it's like, hey, I'm particularly interested in being the best athlete including in the way that I approach healthcare.
Yeah,
So they're
totally.
approaching their healthcare as a way to optimize their athleticism. And I think that this is all strongly related to the longevity dad trend, which is like, I'm viewing athleticism as a method to greater health, right? Like, it's like, but like in a very highly optimized way that we haven't really necessarily seen before, where like, yeah, it was like, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, you were like, yeah, like I like to work out to stay fit. And that was it. And now it's like, I stay fit and I also do DEXA scans and I'm getting blood work to check that like actually the workouts I'm doing are working. And like, my brother is not even 40 yet and he has had like heart scans and oh my God, like all of the tests. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Well, I think it's part of the movement, right, of men's health and moving into kind of the space that women have, created and amplified. And I think a lot of it, at least from my experience and my knowledge, is based off of Peter Attia, who is almost like a ritual. Like he has his own podcast. He's written a book around longevity, oddly enough. He was big on the DEXA scan. That's why people started getting DEXA scans, or kind of at least the interest rose. But it is all around this. And I think he's like, was a high endurance athlete. But I think what you're saying is exactly right. People are all translating that. And I certainly bring a lot of that into my life, all translating that from like, yes, all of these parts are great, but like it works for a high performance athlete. Amazing. But can it also like have me live longer, better, higher quality of life, all of the things. And I'm seeing that for sure. I mean, being in LA and just my friend group, I think that's absolutely right on.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of money in that. Do you want to explain what a DEXA scan is?
Yeah, so a DEXA scan, again, I think it was popularized much by Peter Attia's support of it. A DEXA scan is basically you just lay on this thing that's like a massage table and it scans you. I think it takes like maybe half an hour. It scans you slowly all the way through. And it tells you things like your body fat percentage and things like that, that are helpful, but it also tells you your bone density. So that was something that was really interesting for me because my mom has pretty severe osteoporosis, and to know that I didn't have that and have quite good bone density was great to hear. It tells you your body percentage and a few different things and really breaks it down based on limbs, based on sides, so that you can really understand how to optimize your health. And you're supposed to get them, I don't know, every 3 months, quarter, whatever it might be, to then compare and understand how weightlifting or whatever you're doing in your life is enhancing that. But I think what you're saying in these centers, John Mackey, the former CEO of Whole Foods, started something down in El Segundo called Love Life something.
Yes,
that's like that. Yeah, exactly. There's something just in Venice Circle called the Bode, which is like a DEXA, a blood test, it's all of the parts and pieces. It's exactly kind of what you're saying. But I think, focus on both men's and women, right? It's not just kind of this more feminine driven brand or perspective. And I think it's definitely happening.
Yeah. And I see it as like, there is like this. So I do think there's like there's some crossover of like the women have been there and then the interest is coming. But I also see it as like, there is also this growing trend of like this hyper masculinity, like related to this.
Careful.
Yes. Well, bringing the masculine energy. And there is that trend that is happening too. And I think that like, while I, like when I was talking about this, sharing some thoughts I had with Jessica about it, like I was saying that actually one of the things that I thought was interesting that I can't really quite reconcile with that observation is that the men that I know who are going through it, and this could just be representative of the men that I know, is that the men that I know who are doing this are actually kind of the most evolved of the men that I know. Like, they're the ones doing like men's therapy groups. They're the ones who are like, like couples therapists who are very involved in their kids' life. Like, they are extremely like rounded in their like obsessions, it's also coming from a mental health space. But I do think there is this kind of like parallel ultra masculinity thing happening too. And maybe those two things don't have to like not live together. Like, it's not to say that like one is like not a masculine man. but it is just like an interesting thing that I was like, I felt the need when I was explaining it to her that I was like, I have to unpack this for you. And then I was like, isn't that interesting that I feel like I have to also say like, these aren't these like broy guys. Cause like,
yeah, but I think that's interesting because I think it's for sure true in my experience. And I think it's important, right? Because everybody has masculine and feminine energy and it's just about balancing those two things. And I think it also feels like it's being done in like an evolved, like a newer way when these things are happening. Like people are weightlifting more and people, and men are weightlifting more. And, there's kind of, I at least have more of the awareness around like these really specific weightlifting gyms that aren't like, gold. Yes, gold is still there and it's still happening. But there's also is this more evolved of like slowly you're upping your weight and what it's doing for that. And it's also about mobility within balancing the strength training. And I think that's kind of the difference in it is really that balance throughout because what you're saying is absolutely rings true for me. And the men that I know that are really embracing this are also in therapy, are also embrace their feminine side, kind of do all of these parts and pieces that it makes it a real balance.
Yeah, I just think from like an observational thing, if you're like looking at this as a space, I do think there's kind of like, there's more going on here. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah. And for sure a space to watch and develop. And there's a lot happening. A lot.
Like, I think there's like, we could do a whole podcast just about this.
Yeah, for sure. Brand. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on. What's next in sport? FIFA.
People's Puskas. Puskas.
I mean,
it's
I know
a lot.
Nothing about this,
and,
so.
Yeah. So I'll tell you why it's interesting to me, and I think that'll be more interesting to unpack. But essentially, there's this award for the best goal of the year, right? So, like, you're watching, if you're really into watching soccer, it's a little bit like, like if you're watching basketball, it's like the MVP, right? Like, it's like, but like specifically for a goal. So, like, it'll be like, oh, this was a goal that like went over like this person and like, came from the other side of the field kind of thing, like epic. Like things.
And this is a thing that exists and it's always existed and it's called the Puska Award.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's
I'm up to speed now. Great.
And I felt like it just needed, because I know that like majority of the audience on here is from the US, and so like they might just not have the like soccer world on lock as much as other sports. So, but I think that this campaign is interesting and worth unpacking for you. So via a tool. It's a camera. It looks like a projector. You put it like next to the field. So like imagine you go to a soccer game, your son's soccer game. You put it next to the field and it literally like records the play, like everybody playing, but it will also like follow and track players and it can like follow the game for you. So it's very, very sophisticated. And it's really cool because it's using like very smart intelligence to follow all of these things. But it essentially allows like amateur teams, like whether it's like what my brother plays like in an intramural sports league, right? Like he's like not a professional, but like, it's a league and there's a lot of those.
It's happening.
But like, or kids leagues, which obviously, can get very serious. But like, so instead of having like a videographer on these, they have these machines called VIAs. VIO happens to capture and so you can also like clips and stuff. So like smaller sports team will share their VIO content as part of their social strategy. So they're always sharing these clips online, sharing them on YouTube. It's a very popular way of like taking the content from the game and sharing it. And then they often go viral on TikTok. So like they will catch, like the VIO will happen to have catched this amazing goal and then it goes viral on TikTok and people are obsessed with watching these videos of like amateurs doing these crazy things. Because, like you've got thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions of games happening all the time. You're going to see some pretty crazy stuff.
Right.
And people, and they get millions of views for it. And they're kind of the genesis of this campaign was like, these videos are already getting millions of views, but like not getting like an award for it. But they may as well get an award for it because some of these goals are epic, amazing things. So why not have people submit their goals for the People's Award?
Great.
And so they tied in they tie in their product, which obviously is how they're hoping that people are capturing these goals. Then they are like having people vote on them and having it like be judged. And like, then you get like and it's obviously probably going to be like, I don't know who won it, or if anyone's won it yet, but it's like, going to be like a 7-year-old or a 17-year-old who's like won this crazy thing, and then everybody gets to share it. And I love campaigns like this because I think that it's genuinely like what people love. It's like people love watching amateur sports do a crazy, amazing, like professional level things, which I've already referenced here. Like, and that's getting bigger and bigger. Like Mr. Beast had like this like whole series where he had like amateur, like the best like content creator runners run against like professional Olympic runners, and then they filmed it, and like it almost looked like the content creator was gonna win, because like a lot of people are excellent and amazing athletes, and they just like don't pursue this like crazy dream right early enough, or have any desire to pursue these crazy dreams. But like people love watching their stuff, so I just loved the intention of the campaign. I loved the execution of it on the website was great too, and I loved that it taps into something that is happening all the time, and then you're just making it bigger, which I think is always kind of the best way to kind of come up with a campaign. So like even though it's this tiny little campaign, I just thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, that's pretty. And it feels like it has like the tenets, the outline of like something that, and I'm not saying that they did this, but that really digging in really strategically to say like, okay, we've got this little thing. How can we make it into something really big, and really being smart about, okay, well, let's tap into the culture. Let's tap into the conversations that are already happening. People love watching videos. They love empowering videos. They love, let's give it to the people. Like it's kind of all of those tenets to really make it tied into culture, make it empowering, and then ultimately come back to what their goal is of course, raising awareness to what their mission is and what they're actually doing. But it's rad and empowering and exciting, and I love it. I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that the problem is the name of it like doesn't translate to a US audience. So I think
Puska?
it had like this. Well, it just has this very, like, if you don't know what that is, then it, like, loses it, right? So it's obviously very niche audience, like, although the audience for soccer is not niche. So I think, like, they could do something more with it. I know that when I found out about it, I read that, like, it was an internal team that did it, so I liked that, too. Like, cool that, like, these internal teams are doing, like, cool and fun things, and they're trying and playing and, like, having fun with stuff. But obviously, I think they'd have to rename it if they wanted to come to the US and do it, but, like, the idea still stands, just have to
100%. A lot of naming needs are coming up in this pod. So yeah, it's just an ongoing theme. We got you covered.
Yeah.
All right. Off ball. Oof ball? I want to say oof ball.
So off ball is where I found out about this. So whenever I do a little error like that, like that's my source. So off ball shared this coincidentally. The brand is called Off Season. So not to be confused. But, and I'm not going to be able to say this last name because I don't watch football, so I don't have any reference for the 49ers. And it says 49, but it should say 49ers. I at least know that. But Kristen, the wife of a 49er, partner,
I'm going to say Jashevsky. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah,
Jashevsky.
I'm just terrible with like even pronouncing words that I know how like are written. So names are just.
I have a friend whose last name is Pashevsky, and it's similar.
Okay.
I'm gonna
all right.
Push that.
All right. Give us some feedback on that. So she partnered with Emma Greedy or Greed. I don't know how you say that one either.
Greed.
But she's the.
Greed. I don't know.
Living in Italy, the E is always like E, so like it's also screwing up everything that I already struggle with. But anywho, she's the original co-founder of Good American, and then she is also a partner on Skims, and she is basically widely believed to be the brains and the machine behind the success of those two brands.
Mm-hmm.
And so she partnered with Kristen on this brand called Off Season, which is a fan apparel brand. But like fan apparel has been obviously around forever and ever, but it's really been very male oriented. And I've written about this a lot in the newsletter, like in kind of different ways. But I think the female fan is often like really overlooked. And it was only really when Taylor Swift came into the mix that we all started talking about how there are a lot of female fans watching football. But
Yeah,
like they have been
fair enough.
around and they're well before Taylor Swift and have been around and are in sports and have been in sports like women's sports, men's sports, like female fans have existed for a long time and just kind of been really like just this like they're only there to watch the commercials, like kind of like flick them away, like kind of view.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that is changing now. And so this apparel line is not just for women, but it's obviously geared at like having like actually cool fan apparel that you might want to wear. So like different teams like represented, different names, you know, like so they have kind of these cool silhouettes of things, and then you can kind of get them in their different teams that you have, and like so all of that. And I just think that like given who she got to partner with her, like the partnership makes sense. Like obviously Emma has a huge track record of creating amazing brands and running brands. And I think there's like, you know, that the operations behind a retail brand are not insignificant reason for it to be a success, right? Like how a brand like that is run is very different to maybe like a CPG or fragrance line, a celebrity fragrance line.
For sure. 100%.
Apparel is just like, you know, it's just totally different. And so I think the fact that they have like a really solid operator who obviously believes in brand too behind it, and then and are tapping into something that is just completely underserviced. I'm bullish. I think it'll be great. I think you're going to hear a lot more about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting space. And I think, yes, Taylor Swift for sure. But I think also just how relevant women's sports are, and people have woken up to that. You know, so obviously like, there's a lot more audience.
When you see Taylor Swift and like all these people, basically like the wives and the people that you see, they were getting custom looks made for them because the options are so limited. Because it's basically like, hey, would you like this men's jersey that's going to make you look horrible? Oh, okay, you can have that, and you can like cut it up or do something with it or tuck it in and try your best. Or you can go and have like a custom piece of apparel made by a stylist, like, and there was nothing in between.
Right. Yeah, seems like a good opportunity. And I'm excited to see what she does. Cool. All right. Let's move into fun for the week.
Yeah. All right.
It's some good.
What are you talking about?
I mean, you know, keeping it on kind of our sport theme, I think. You know, obviously, like you have what Apple did around Severance, and I think it's amazing, but I think a lot of people have kind of talked about that. And, you know, I don't know if there's anything you want to say, or we should move on to cricket.
I mean, I could talk about cricket. Cricket is kind of like a...
I know you could. I still won't get it for the 100th time you want to talk about it, but I'm here for it.
So you know how I'm passionate about golf and have been passionate about golf and like evangelizing golf to brands for like the last decade before anyone listened to me? And you know how I was passionate about pickleball and evangelizing?
Yeah, but pickleball I'll take. I still, the golf thing. Yeah. Yes.
Golf is a much bigger opportunity. But
true on all of these points, yes.
Okay. So I would like to explain to you that the potential, if there is like, so one of the things that's really difficult in the US is that it's difficult for like new sports to come in that aren't like kind of embedded in your culture already, right? Like soccer has had a really, really hard time taking off. And actually, I think it was like all the women playing soccer, and then all the dads getting into soccer that eventually like kind of has allowed soccer to kind of become bigger. And then I think as more and more people have become obsessed with it, and then more teams have come to Miami and things like that, and you know, like a David Beckham, and like then it is
specific professional leagues.
Yes, I'm talking about professional sports, but like so it's been a long road for soccer, and soccer obviously has like an enormous following around the world, so it's always been like kind of everyone's like, how is this so difficult for you to get into the US? But I think that we're really seeing the turning point, obviously, and I think the next World Cup will be huge in the US. Like, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that if cricket can figure itself out, it could be the new tennis. And let me explain why. Going to a cricket game is a little bit like going to a baseball game, in the sense that, like, I would never, ever, ever watch baseball on TV, but I could go to a baseball game anytime that somebody asks, right? Because it's just, like, nice to be there. Like, it's nice to be in the stadium, and, like, I don't really care about what's going on in the field, but, like, the atmosphere is nice.
The hot dogs, the beer. Yeah, I agree with, but, like, yeah, the event of it.
Okay, so cricket is like that, except that it's more akin to tennis, because it's like more, it's a little bit more sophisticated. Like, you kind of have a picnic vibe. It goes on for like sometimes 2 to 3 days. So like, it's very, but you know, like how tennis tournaments are like multiple days. So there's like more, like,
Yeah.
you could kind of come to like one part of it or the whole thing or whatever, but there's a continuity in tennis. And so I think that's like why I try to make that parallel for people, is that unlike like a football game or something where it's like, hey, you got to watch this game and you got to watch that game, and then the two, like, it's like 2 weeks apart or a week apart or whatever. This is like more of a kind of a tournament style sport typically. But it is so easy to play cricket as an amateur. Like, my family, we grew up playing cricket on the beach. Like, whenever we would go on a vacation, we played cricket together. And like, I don't like a big sports person. I kind of like mildly athletic, but like not, like, never got into like soccer or anything like that. But like, you can play cricket without any problem. And when you go downtown in Italy here, like, there are people playing cricket here in the park. Like, it is just a very easy family friendly game to get into. So I could 100% see, like, if America could embrace it. Like, it is a coming together sport. Like, it has all the things. It has the feeling of like bougie cocktails in the stadium.
Yep.
It has
The
family
outfits are pretty
friendly,
cool.
like, it's fun to play as a family, which I think, you know, like, potentially could be nice for Americans. Like, I think it just has a lot of potential, but it's just never really like tried to do a big thing of it. But they are making a big effort to have like some tournaments in the US this year. So investment is being made. So maybe if you hear this, I invite you to try it.
You heard it here first. Yeah, I'm in. Okay. Maybe.
They have cocktails. You'll go. It'll be great.
I'm in.
You love playing sports with your kids, I'm sure.
I do. Isn't it the paddle? The whole, yeah, I do think more family-friendly things that we can play. And I do think that's one of the reasons that pickleball, like, anybody can play it. I think it's fun. I think it's easy. I think all the things. So yeah, I'm for all of those boxes it checks. I'm here for it. Here for it. Super Bowl? Fashion?
Okay, so when I told Kirsten that we were like, okay, like, maybe we'll stick to the sports theme, I was like, okay, well, we have to talk about Bode going to the Super Bowl. And then she went to click on the link because she hadn't had time to finish, you know, rightly so, everything going on with fires, like, she gets a pass, has not had time to go through the newsletter. Well, friends, neither will you if you haven't, because it has been taken down. And then I proceeded to spend the next 10 minutes trying desperately to find this video to show Kirsten. But I won't reenact it for you.
And then she did reenact it, which I really appreciate.
I did reenact it for Kirsten. The rest of you will not get that. But, you know, so for context, Bode is what I would say is like a new luxury brand that is kind of like has a very cult following. They have these beautiful stores. You know, like, is it luxury, like in the way that you think of like Chanel or anything like that? Like, no, but I think of it kind of in line with like a Thom Browne new luxury brand, and certainly highly respected and like kind of beloved, and with the people that follow her, and has done Nike collabs and things that are like always just like so stunning. It's menswear focused, so like maybe this makes sense to them. But anyway, Bode comes out and they say that they're going to do a fashion show at the Super Bowl in cahoots. What's the word I'm looking for?
Collaboration.
In collaboration with GQ. Okay. Interesting. This is not a combination that I saw going. I don't understand the brand at Super Bowl. And I know that we're all like luxury, like athleticism, like is all having a marriage right now. Like, I get that. But this particular brand, like, I just do not I do not see it. Actually, Tom Brown would have made much more sense. He always does something for the
Mm-hmm.
Rose Bowl thing. Like he
Yeah.
has like kind of an interest in American football. So like, and who knows? But anyway, this video with announcement, like she looked like she was under duress. Like, I mean, like she's pregnant. So like, I hope that it was just like that. But like, and obviously she has like kind of a very stoic look, and like everybody can have different personalities. Like, I'm not going to judge that, but she did not look happy. Like, she was not there for it. And the fact that the video is gone tells me something. Like, it is
like not a trace, like
there's
gone.
not a trace of this video on GQ, on Bode's, like nowhere. Presumably the fashion show is still happening. I'm sure we'll learn more about that as the thing goes on. You know, I think that sports and luxury fashion are really having a moment. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more, but like, I think it just has to make sense for brands. Like, I think you have to get your brand to make sense for it, or you have to find a way for it to make sense. Maybe like the GQ thing, like, you know, it was obviously not going to necessarily be at the Super Bowl. So like the timing of it, but like, I don't know. Like, I just struggle when brands like try to make you make this huge leap. When it's like there's this cultural thing happening and they want you to get there, they want to be part of it, and then they want you to get there with them in like one fell swoop. Like, I just struggle.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fascinating because I think it's really trying to figure out, and I think it's great that GQ's like pushing to do something different, because I think fashion shows in general, it's like, well, what's the new iteration of them? Because the way it's happening right now, like, let's reinvent the model. And I'm 100% here for that, because even like the buying and the system that fashion shows were originally for, it doesn't really stand anymore. So it's like, I think completely rethinking that. But I think really understanding, like, is this audience really interested in that? And if so, I'd be super excited to see like what it's going to be, because I'm hoping it's not just going to be a typical runway show, and do something that feels more interesting, more integrated, more, you know, kind of next thing.
But that's kind of what I mean, though, is that like the Bode brand to me is like, it's so personal. Like, she does a lot of like bespoke things, like where she's like, I've created 5 of these jackets and they're handmade, you know, like, and the stores are very, very understated and like quiet, I would say. And so it's just very hard for me when you think Super Bowl and like the showcase of that and the whole like spectacle of that, and then to like push a brand up against that like doesn't really have spectacle in its brand, is just hard for me to picture what they're going to do. But I'm obviously curious.
Yeah, super. Yeah.
Remains
all right.
to be seen.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing that we have to talk about, Lime bikes.
Yeah. So Timothy Chalamet turned up at a premiere on a Lime bike in London and claims,
like, just appeared.
Well, yeah,
and it was a pretty dirty Lime bike.
And yeah, and he claimed that he was like, no, like, this was not sponsored. I just took a Lime bike to get here, and like, here we are. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, I've read that like Lime has been doing an enormous amount of investing in their brand kind of cultural vibe in the UK specifically, and trying to kind of like shake off this like what I would say of like kind of like Lime vibe. You know, like, I think that like in the US anyway, like my view on it is that people like love the concept of the like city bikes and all of those things, but no one like thinks of them as like cool. Like, no one's like, oh yeah, like those are like cool. And Lime has really been doing a lot to kind of like embed itself in culture, and has been kind of successful in doing so. And is like, everybody rides a Lime bike everywhere, and it's like kind of like part of being like part of being a Londoner. So I thought it was interesting. Whether or not it was like placed or not placed, like, almost doesn't matter, because I think if it wasn't placed, then it's like what they're doing is working, and and then if it was placed, then they obviously did insert themselves into culture,
and what you're doing is working.
So
yeah.
I don't know. Kudos to them, I guess.
Yeah, it was well done. Yeah, I noticed it. We're talking about it. here we are. It's a cultural phenomenon now, and it's cool. All right. We're
This
almost
is
to the
fun.
50
I'm glad you're
mark.
back.
I'm glad we're
Yes.
back too. We're playing around with different versions, so feel free in the comments, let us know what's working for you, what's not. Give us a little love on the algorithm.
Yeah.
And let us know if you have naming or, other brand needs.
Yeah. We've also talked about having some guests on the show. So mainly thinking about, for lack of a better term, how the sausage gets made at a brand. Like
Terrible term, but yes.
How do campaigns like say Lime, like talking about like how are they doing these things? How are they inserting themselves into culture? What are they doing in their internal systems in order to kind of like have this success that they're having? How are they structured? Not like how did the ad come to be, but like how is your team working in order to kind of like do the things that you're doing?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if you think there's a cool brand that we should be talking to about that and you think they want to play, let us know.
Yep. All right. Until next time.